All right, everybody, in the world of world history, welcome back. Here we go, the start of our next unit. We're moving along. By the time we're finished here, heck, it might be the 1700s. I know, right? Um, when last we spoke, the Catholic Church was taking a hit, and they had some people not pleased with how they were going about doing things. So they changed some things, and then the Catholic Church said, "Well, we really would like to keep our Catholic membership, so we'll do a few things. We'll make a few changes." But at the end of the day, we're the Catholic Church, you're not. But the big thing and the big takeaway from this is just another in a list of things that eats away just a little bit at that complete power that the Catholic Church specifically, had on the lives of the people during this time period. So remember, before that, there was the Renaissance. Even though it was religious, remember there was a change in how we viewed ourselves, and that we actually have value on this earth. The greatest invention of all time comes about during this time period. Before that, you had some of the struggles and some of the changes brought about by the Middle Ages, the plague being the big one, and how it affected feudalism and people were able to make money. And because that we prayed and prayed and prayed, and yet our family still died. So moving up until we get to now, which is this era of exploration and the rulers who are going to propel us to other parts of the world, the Catholic Church, just takes a few more hits. And now during this time period, the rulers, the kings primarily, and some queens, begin to assert themselves as maybe they should have more power. And this kind of happens during this time period. So this question that's right here, I want to come back to it uh, when we finish this unit, because it dovetails, it ties in where we were, and it ties in where we're going. So it's a nice kind of historical sandwich, if you will. So remember this question, how did the Protestant Reformation and how does exploration, which is going to happen later this week, how do both of those work together from opposite ends to strengthen the kings and queens of Europe? So how is it that these events make the kings and queens start to become more powerful than the church? All right. All right, so let's go. Let's learn about these people. All right, this is the rise of the absolute monarchs. It's a 300-year period. Notice, remember, continuing the idea that history is not segmented. This 300-year period right here, right there it is, right there, encompasses the latter part of the Renaissance. It encompasses, the Reformation and the Counter Reformation. It encompasses the lost colony and exploration and colonization and colonial America. I mean, it takes us all the way. These rulers ruled during all this time, and part of the reason, and we'll get into more of the reasons why we start exploring a little bit later. Each of these rulers wants to be like the ruler. Um, so you're going to do things to make your country better. So the idea of being English or French or Spanish or Portuguese or Dutch or someone from the Netherlands is a big deal. And so that's what they're going to focus on. They're going to focus on their legacy, how they are seen as a king or a queen, and hopefully making their countries great in the eyes of everyone else. Now, they got their power, as I alluded to, by taking some of it from the Catholic Church. Okay? Um, So the Protestant Reformation gave them more power. And then, like I said, the thing that they're going to do, they're going to colonize other parts of the world. And that's going to bring money and wealth back to their country. And this becomes the goal. Who has the most toys, the most land, the most people, the most gold is the winner. And if I control gold or tobacco or some spice and you don't, then you've got to go through me. And that's just more money. So this is all about who can have the nicest house if your country's a house. All right? Okay, let's keep going. And remember, as with all my notes, pause, write them down, keep them. Remember, these are very helpful with the packets. I know there's a lot of information, but the stuff online, this is good information to help you answer it. Or should we have a test at the end of the year? Good notes. All right. Um, this flow chart just kind of shows you from both ends how we get to the absolute monarchs. And then they give you an example of Louis that's this right here. That's 14. For you Roman numerally challenged people, that's Louis XIV, Louis XIV, the Sun King. Anyway, feudalism breaks down. Remember, as going back as the Middle Ages come to the end, and there's a plague. The landowners need people to tend their crops. So now, if you're a serf or a peasant on the land, you can go to different places and actually get paid a wage because they need their crops harvested and they know you're alive. So that's good. So those kings that were able to keep people and hire people, they're going to become more powerful, and that's going to lead us to this. Also, after us, another thing that leads to this is the Age of Enlightenment, which comes after this time period, and the fact that kings are chosen by God. Because remember, the Pope chose the kings early on, so the idea that I am divinely chosen, that was actually given to them by the Pope. It's sort of like a gift with an unintended consequence. It's kind of like a gremlin. They're really, really cool, and then something bad happens, and the Pope probably wishes he'd never given it to him. So, if you don't know that movie, it's pretty cool. Anyway, so this is kind of how it comes about. The most important thing to understand in all of this is this right here. That my power as king, or your power as queen, if you're a girl watching this, comes to you through God. So therefore, it must be good. It must be right. And who are you to question it? So it's both positive and like, look, I'm the king, I'm the queen, you're not. Just kiss the ring. All right. So here we go. Now, a couple of things we talked about. Again, this idea that it absolute power, complete, total control of all decisions. Okay. This is decisions. This is all aspects of society. So that's economic decisions, military decisions, political decisions, social decisions. Um, England's going to go through a civil war during this time period over which church should have authority. Remember, Henry VIII created the Church of England, the Anglican Church. That's a Protestant church, but his daughter Mary was a Catholic. His other daughter Elizabeth was a Protestant, and those two families are going to go to war. And then there's going to be a Charles and a James and a Charles. Then there's going to be a time in England when there's no monarchy and they kill the king, right? Okay. So every aspect of your life controlled by the monarch. That's absolutism, absolute control, absolute decision making. You couple that with, and I'm appointed by God. God hired me, basically. So obviously all my decisions are good. God hired me. All right. And then the last part here that's, excuse me, kind of being overlapped is that in France, the absolute monarch disappears after the French Revolution, and then in Russia, all the way in 1917, all the way to World War One, before they finally get rid of their absolute ruler, and there are still some around today. So there you go. So it's not a completely dead form of government. Now, the monarch is the executive. No legislative, no judiciary, no checks and balances. The monarch decides what's bought, what's not bought, what's used, what's not used. There's no one there to justify his power. The power comes from my family, my dynasty, my father before me, his father before me, and God. Our job, our idea of citizen participation is not to vote like we have today. It's just to listen and respect the king or queen. Yes, sir. We're yes men and yes women. That's what we are during the time of the absolute monarch. They have all the say. We just like, okay. Now, all forms of government have positives and negatives. We do not live in an absolute monarchy today. We live in what is it? A federal republic. We vote for people. We're a democratic republic where it's a federal government, meaning that power is shared between the DC and the states. We vote for people who then make decisions for us, and that's the type of government we have, modeled after Rome, if you remember. All right. So, but there are advantages and disadvantages for our government, just like there are advantages and disadvantages for any other form of government. Even Hitler, in his totalitarian state, did some good for Germany. But I digress. As far as an absolute monarch, the biggest benefit is you know who's giving you the answers. You know who's making the decision, and you know you're not going to question it. Then the other thing that's good about a monarch is stability. So long as they have sons or a brother, but so long as there are sons or brothers, and then in some cases girls, as long as they have children, and those children have children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you always know who your ruler is going to be. And that's kind of nice to not have to worry about two sides fighting for control and civil war breaking out and it being just an ungood thing. So that's nice. Now, disadvantages: we have no say, we have no rights, we have no choice, and for all the stability in knowing who's in charge, sometimes the son wanted to be in charge sooner than later, and so there are random changes all of a sudden. Or if a king lives forever and they're just a horrible king, that's where the infrequent comes from, then you're stuck with a horrible king for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. So that's, you know, that's, those are the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons, the plus deltas. All right. France and Spain were definitely excellent examples of absolute monarchs pre Enlightenment. And yes, Saudi Arabia today is a very good contemporary example of an absolute monarch. But even they're making some changes slowly. Women can finally drive. That's and that may seem like nothing, but to Muslim women in Saudi Arabia, that's a freedom. That's the ability to do something you couldn't do before. All right, all right. Okay. The big theme here is control. I should be playing Janet Jackson. All right, control the government. They centralize the power. A bureaucracy is just a fancy word for agency or a group of people who in the government have a specific task. It could be we have different agencies in the federal government, like well, HUD is one, and that's health and health, housing and urban development, or what else is the one? Department of Education, Department of Defense. All of these things are bureaucracies. Everything that you have to go through to get your driver's license is bureaucracy. It's paperwork and government and this form and that form and this permissions. That's bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is all the stuff that you have to go through to do something. The king controls that. He controls his decision-making body, or it's him. And he can add all the hoops he wants that you have to jump through to get that land or buy those sheep or whatever. Another thing that, as far as controlling, if I'm the king making all the decisions, you have less power, and other wealthy nobles have less power because they're not king. So I can reduce power and tamp power down, which is one of those things that led to the sort of erratic nature of kings. Sometimes kings are removed. I mean, we saw it a lot in Rome, and you see it some in Europe, but nothing like, I mean, this Europe, medieval, modern, post Renaissance, pre Enlightenment, absolute era Europe. You see it some, but nothing like the extent we saw it in Rome. So that's one way to execute control. Control the nobility, like I just said. If you make courts larger, then it's very difficult for one person to have that voice to monopolize thought. And you can just reduce altogether. I mean, I can have a court and I can listen to you, but if I don't take your suggestion seriously, then you really have no power. You have a nice voice, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Again, that's just part of keeping all the controls central to me or to you if you feel like being king or queen today. You control the economics. You control building projects, ports, harbors, roads, bridges, dams, walls, stuff like that. All the economic policies for your country are controlled by you. So a farmer in Raleigh or Mecklenburg County or the coast or the mountains, all the rules apply. Or if it's a country, if economic policies are centralized, then no matter what kind of factory you own in America, no matter, it's the same rules apply to everybody. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but at least you know what's going on, ideally. And it's easier for him to control or her to control who's building what. or what's being produced or how much is being sold, because at the end of the day, that's a king's goal. That's a queen's goal. Money. Okay? All right. And then the whole idea about controlling power. You control power by saying, I'm chosen by God. And because God chooses me, he trusts me. They would argue he trusts me to choose the right religion. And again, Catholic Church, it is a Spanish thing. The Catholic Church is a French thing. It is not the German territories. It is not in England, depending upon who ruled. So there are different people in different parts of Europe with different religious beliefs and religious and churches who are sort of like the state churches, and that's going to lead to numerous wars. In fact, the 30 Years' War between the German states and France is a religious war. So there are a lot of religious wars post Reformation. All right, this is just showing you the things on the top. These are all the things that led to the power of the king or queen growing: cities, national kingdom, a middle class, people who have money and want to keep their money and are worried about taxes, or typically the middle class are business people or merchants, and they need to sell stuff to make money. So they want a king who can help them make money. Revolts can help. The colonies being wealthy. Once we start exploring, bringing stuff back to your country. Look at what I'm doing for us. A further breakdown of church authority. You move me. Decline of feudalism again. People working for themselves, and economic and religious crises. This ties in with this, and they both deal with the Reformation and the Counter Reformation. Now, this is how they got power, and this is how they strive to keep it. Reduce the power of the nobles, create lots of government red tape, make the court larger, regulate what we make, what we sell, what we buy, regulate who can gather, why we can gather, and then regulate what we're going to worship. All these things can help keep control. When you take American history in the future and you talk about the early settlers, the Puritans who come out of the Protestant Reformation, the Puritans were pretty big on social gatherings for control. They outlawed Christmas in the colonies. The Puritans in England, in a little bit later on this unit, are going to outlaw drinking, dancing, playing cards, gambling, fun of any kind, because they saw that as getting in the way of God's teachings. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But this is everything. This is how they got their power, and this is what they tried to do to keep it. All right? Remember that. Now, here we go. When they emerged from the Middle Ages, the monarch's power grew. We've been discussing that. The decline of feudalism, the rise of cities, a growing middle class. The last slide. Church power allowed monarchs to gain more power. This is huge. And then remember too, in the next slide that I just got to a little quickly, talked about crises, things happening, emergencies, and how during a crisis, now in this time period, typically what's a crisis going to be? It's going to be an attack, maybe a famine, a disease, a religious fight, probably. So different, a potential invasion, but typically they're much more traumatic than today. Typically. All right. Religious conflicts, territorial conflicts. That's my land. No, that's my ancestral land. Whether it be England and the people of Scotland trying to get their independence, or whether it be France and the German states, or just different areas squabbling and fighting over borders, or when Europe has the Reformation, it's just not like everybody said, "Oh, now I'm a Protestant." Or you have Protestants and Catholics living together. You had two different churches vying for power. There's going to be disagreement and there's going to be struggle, and this happened like a lot, especially in the 1600s in Europe. Um, Creating armies costs money, and the larger your army and the more you fight, the more it costs to fund an army, the more taxes you have to pay. So it's good, one, to win them quickly, because the people are paying for this army, and if you keep taxing them and taxing them and taxing them, you're going to become very unpopular, and you don't want to be an unpopular king. So, right. So peasant revolts were always an issue. This goes back to the conflict and the strife bit of being a king. Um, how do you stop it? You give yourself more power and you say you can't do this. Remember on the previous slide, I talked about how they controlled people coming together in assemblies. If you don't want the peasants to revolt, don't allow them to organize. Don't allow them to come together and plan. And that's what kings and queens do during this time period, is just say, no, forget it. All right. How do we get wealth? Because that's, remember, wealth, money, 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 the Quan. All right. Seizing territories in the New World, that's the Americas. Remember, everybody knew the world was round, but no one knew those land masses were there. Wait, you're looking at me, I'm Europe, they're over here. Okay. So no one knew that. Or the Far East. The Far East is just a generic and a culturally insensitive term that they used back then, actually for a long time, into the 1900s, to describe the Koreas, Japan, China. That's the Far East. All right, and there's our good friend Columbus landing in India. Well, that's where he thought he was going. All right, expanding trade with other countries overseas and trading with Europe. Remember, the plague is over. All those things that they were introduced to during the Crusades or through the Silk Road or other means, or things that were starting to grow because every country is starting to develop certain industries. Well, customers help. Again, case in point, Apple did not really want to make a big phone. They liked their standard iPhone sizes. When was it, about 45 years ago now? The first larger iPhone came out. You know why? The Chinese like bigger phones, and there's a billion Chinese. Big phones. All right. Wow. Sun makes me look really, really bald. Can I pull it off? Do you think I can pull it off? I don't know if I can pull it off. Let me know what you think. All right. And then there's the Dutch East India Company, and that's the trading part. Okay, that's the idea of going and getting those spices that were brought back, and we'll talk about this more in a bit, and getting them for yourselves. That way you can control the price. If you can control the price, you can control the profit. Whereas before, you'd have to send a ship, buy the spices from somebody in that country, take the spices back to your country or wherever you stop along the way, raise the price because you want to make your money back plus make a profit. And if it gets too expensive, that's going to cut your profit. So if you just go and either one, take that country over so you can control the spice, or kind of chisel your way into a portion of their spice trade, then you can get it at a lower price. You can sell it you can still raise the price, but you don't have to sell it for as much as before. That way you still make a bigger profit and people don't feel like they're being fleeced. All right. Then, of course, all those middle class people and all those people who are selling those things and all those people who are making things, they are now richer. So you tax them too. And that's how you get your money. And the goal is for you to take more money in than you have to spend to buy stuff. That's the goal of being king, obviously. You want to make more than you spend. It's common sense. All right. And there are some explorers, some conquistadors. Okay. They use this wealth, to build large permanent armies. Prior to this time period in Europe, most armies were seasonal, uh, voluntary, almost like a militia. You were called up, the king needed you, you were called up, you went, you were paid, but you were a farmer first, or a merchant first, or a blacksmith first, and a soldier second. Now, what you're starting to see is army as a profession, and they keep large armies on hand, pay them, but keep them on hand and then use them as they see fit, either aggressively or defensively. Questions? All right. No more need to depend on feudal contracts with the vassals. That's right. The armies are loyal to the king, not the country, and this becomes problematic. potentially in some places. And the reason that they're loyal to the king is because it's the king giving them gold or paying them, not the country. All right. So, who exactly are we talking about? Who are some of these rulers that now are trying to take all this newfound power? Well, they think it's newfound power, trying to take all this power and use it to become the best, the greatest king, queen, monarch of all time, to make their country the GOAT country. All right? That's the goal. Richest, he who has the most toys wins. That's where we're going. All right. So who are we talking about? Well, let's start with this guy right here. Like the armor, like that beard. That's pretty nice. It looks like he's been home for a while. All right. That's Charles V. Remember V? That's five. That's Charles V. All right. He held two crowns. He was the king of two things. Two things. One, king of Spain. Two, the Holy Roman Empire or the Habsburg Empire. It's called the Holy Roman Empire because it's an area that the Pope thought should be a thing. And anyway, but he ruled both of them. That's a lot to rule. It's a lot of land. It's a lot of different cultures, a lot of different ethnicities. It was a hassle. It was a headache. He was miserable. He did not like it. Uh, for 40 years, he was the most powerful man in Europe from 1516 to 1556. This is, let's see, 1520. Nope, not Jamestown yet. We're still, heck, we're not even the White Colony, the Mason Barlow Count. None of that's happened yet. I think, nope, we're still stuck in Europe. Fought against the rising Protestants in the German states. Remember, Germany's not a country yet. It's a bunch of little independent states. And that was to the west and to the north of his. Okay, here's Spain and the Ottoman Empire right here. All right. Over here, down here in this region, the Ottoman Turks, and up here are the Germans. Okay, there you go. There's your map of Europe. Now, I should bring a map out here from now on. And then he fought against the Muslims in the Balkans. The Balkans is a region. Okay, let's see if you have a map. Okay, remember, do a little mental mapping here. The Balkans are north of Greece, a little east of Greece, and they're north east of Greece and northwest of Turkey. That's right there. That's the Balkans. That's where Croatia and Bosnia Herzegovina and Serbia, Montenegro, and Kosovo. That's where those places are. Okay, that's where World War One started, ish. All right, moving on. This stressed him out. So in 1556, he actually quit. He said, "I'm done with this." He quit, and he split it. He split up his kingdom, and he gave one part to one relative, he gave one part to another relative, and off he went. I think he went and became a monk. I think, and if I'm wrong, hold on. Hey Siri, what did Charles V do after he abdicated his thrones? Okay, I found this on the web for what did Charles V do after he abdicated his throne. Thank you. Yep, he did. He became a monk. Oh, I remember that. All right. So the stress was a problem. He divided up his country, his kingdom, his empire, in a way. Uh, Spain went to 29-year-old Philip II, and the Habsburg Empire went to his brother Ferdinand. So he split it up. Now, Philip II is a very important dude with respect to Catholic Church and the rise of Spain and Spain becoming super explorer Spain. Okay, that was Charles V. He's one of those first absolute rulers. All right, Philip II, this guy right here. You can see the resemblance. See? Can you see the resemblance? See, like father, like son. He's the first real absolute monarch because Charles, I mean, he had so much to cover. He had so many different lands to be for which he was responsible. Obviously, it stressed him out. I mean, it took him 40 years to get too stressed out, but I don't truly think he embraced it like Philip. Like Philip, he's the king, and he lets you know he's the king, and he likes being the king, and he's got a king agenda. So let's go. All right. He ruled for 42 years, and while he ruled, Spain was the big dog. Spain, yeah, Spain was the big dog in Europe during this time period under the rule of Philip II. Workaholic, strong Catholic. He was not a king like we think of kings, throwing big parties and being all fancy. Like, he's not Louis XIV. He's not French. Trust me, you'll see what I mean in a second. He was much more like a monk. He was such a devout Catholic that he was much more inclined to stay in his castle, to be isolated. The palace was a somber, quiet, stoic, deeply Catholic place. He married a total of 4 times, so not too Catholic. Claimed divine right over his subjects. He attacked Protestantism and the belief of Protestantism. He attacked anybody non-Catholic in Spain at all times. He saw his mission and his calling in life to make Spain the model Catholic state, and to take and spread this model Catholicism all over the world. This is what he feels he's destined to do. He fought wars against Muslims and Protestants in the Netherlands and in the Mediterranean. Again, those people aren't Catholics, so they're a problem. And he is responsible for the Spanish Armada that was launched in 1588 against England. And it's this Armada that is responsible for our lost colony. All right, but more about that later. Questions? Okay. And then this is just a picture showing you the Spanish Armada and what happened and when it happened. It was partially British naval expertise, partially, but also partially just really bad weather. And there were storms and it wasn't good. So it ultimately led to the defeat of the Armada, and that marked the beginning of the end of the height of true Spanish power. Once the Armada, and by the way, an Armada, that should not be Armada, that should be Armada, nice spelling. The Armada, an Armada is just a large fleet. And so, with a good portion of its navy crippled, sunk, Spain economically is going to take a hit because, it's the 1500s, the 16th century. Shipping was literally shipping. So without boats, your economy is going to struggle. And again, if you feel like it, watch the YouTube video below, take some more notes. Can't hurt you. Moving on. Now, here's some highlights of Philip's reign as the King of Spain. Oh, it rhymed. He defeated the Ottoman Empire in 1571. He lost the northern provinces of the Netherlands, and he lost the Spanish Armada to England. So the southern part of Europe, he was able to control and solidify and make larger. The northern part, not so much. All right, what else? The Armada marked the beginning of like I said, the Spanish Armada is the beginning of the end for Spain. Once the Armada is defeated, the revenue from trade doesn't come in like it used to, and its reputation as a navy and a powerful country takes a hit as well. And it probably didn't help, and I don't know this for historical fact, but it is 1588, and it probably didn't help that he lost to a girl, because Spanish Armada was defeated by England under the rule of Queen Elizabeth I. All right, so, and then weak rulers, costly wars, and the neglect of farming and commerce also aided to the downfall. These are also some of the things that affected the fall of the Roman Empire. There seems to be a trend when empires or countries struggle, they tend to forget what got them there. When Philip was making Spain the perfect Catholic country state, he kicked out Muslims who were very smart. Remember, what they kept alive helped foster the Renaissance. And he also kicked all the Jews out of well. He also kicked a large percentage, if not all, the Jews out of Spain. and Jews were the intellectuals. There's a theory that Spain suffered from. Come on, yeah, I know you want to. Oh, it doesn't work on the borders. Suffered from brain drain. Oh well, during this time period. Okay. And because they were so dependent on what they were bringing back from the Americas, gold, silver, goods, and services, they stopped farming to raise money, and so they just lost food, they lost money. Um, and by the middle of the 1600s, and then you can't see it here, other people, and by other people we mean other countries, began to pass Spain uh, for power and prestige and economic might, and those countries being primarily England, yeah, and France in Europe, but England as a worldwide thing. All right, so that's Philip II, and then this is just a painting of his death. It's pretty amazing, actually. El Greco. No, anyway, Louis the 14th. Okay, remember, that's 14 in Roman numerals. That's 10, and that is 5 minus 1. That's how you do it. Okay, so Louis the 14th. I didn't make it up. Louis comes to power, and it's not Louis, it's Louis. It's Louis. Louis XIV. All right, here we go. He's the most powerful ruler in French history. Okay. Louis was a boy king. He became king early on, Cardinal Mazarin. A cardinal is a person right below the Pope, a high member of the Catholic Church in Paris, in France. He served as the regent. Let me see if it mentions it. Yeah, okay. He serves as a regent, and a regent helps him become a ruler and guides him and helps with the decisions because he's just a boy. All right. So some of the things that happens during this time period is he ended the 30 Years' War. Lasted from, you're going to be amazed at this, 1618. I don't know if it's on this PowerPoint, so I'm just giving it to you now. It's 1648. Holy cow, 30 years. He increased taxes. He strengthened the central government. Again, when you see the term central government, what that means is there's going to be one place in the country that makes the really big decisions for the rest of the country. In the United States, it's Washington, D.C. Yes, there's a government in North Carolina that controls big decisions for the state. There's a government in Raleigh that controls big decisions for the city. Here we're talking about big decisions for the country, so that's Paris. Um, he and then that made the nobles very unhappy because nobles like having power, nobles like having a voice, and this is a cardinal, not even a king, but a cardinal speaking for a king, saying, "Yeah, no, the power is going to be here. He's the king. He's chosen by God. You guys aren't, so deal with it." All right, there were rebellions and they failed. They failed because, well, all the different noblemen couldn't trust one another, so how could they work together? Two, the government just squashed them. They just put them down. They didn't allow them to revolt. And three, townspeople and peasants got tired of all the fighting because remember, they're the ones dying. They're the ones who have to go fight. They're the ones, the rich landowner. I mean, feudalism's not dead, it's just severely wounded, but it's the poor that are the ground soldiers. And so they're tired of this. They're tired of the uncertainty. They like knowing who the king is. They like knowing where decisions are coming from. So, yeah. Now, he also weakens their authority. By doing all this, the nobles have less authority. So, if you're living in, I'm just going to give you another French town because, it helps. You're living in Lyon, and you are a nobleman who's always had a lot of influence in Lyon over the people. All of a sudden, because of the cardinal and because of this king, they're like, no, 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 no. You take care of local decisions. The king will take care of the big ones. Okay, this is all the power you have. This is all the power the king has. And that's what they're doing to the nobles. And it's also important to note that many of these nobles were very, very, very wealthy, but they weren't chosen by God to be king. So no matter how wealthy you were, And no matter how much you felt you should have a voice, sorry. Uh, Cardinal Mazarin dies. Mazarin dies, and at 22 years of age, Louis XIV becomes king of France. He also weakened. He continues to weaken the power of the nobles because he wants to be the king and he wants to be the absolute authority by not letting them into councils, by not letting them have a say in any decisions, by just letting them be basically yes men. Okay. He increased the power of his agents, called the intendants or intendant. These are people who worked for him, and they end up having more power than a lot of the nobles do. And again, if you know who these people are, and you're the person responsible for hiring them, then they're easier to control. And if these people have power and they don't, they're easier to control. So it's pretty smart, actually, for a 22-year-old. Collected, and the purpose of these people was to collect taxes and to administer justice. It's almost like hitmen, but not. All right. Under Jean Baptiste Colbert, he believed in the idea of mercantilism, and we'll get into this more in the exploration unit. But basically, mercantilism is what I said before. It's the belief that you want to sell more of your stuff to other people than you buy of theirs. If I make clothing and you make clothing, or if I grow cotton and you grow cotton, I want other people to buy my cotton, not I want to be able to buy my own cotton and grow my own stuff, and instead of having to buy it from you. And then I want to sell my goods to other people, to hurt you twice. So the goal of this is to always, 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 always make a profit. Sell more of your stuff to other people than you buy of theirs. No matter what it is, you want trade to be favorable from your end. And this is another reason for struggle amongst countries, because every country's thinking this way. Every country wants everyone else to buy more of their stuff. And that's kind of hard to do. Everybody can't sell more than they buy. So unless you have one thing that no one has, like silk. Um, so that's what he believed in. He believed in economic growth. He believed in France producing goods and selling them, bringing stuff back and using it to turn into something else and sell for a profit. This is what his economic advisor believed. Like it's right there. If we can produce all we need, we don't need another country. And there are pros and cons to being self-sufficient, vice being a trading company, but that's an economics talk, and I don't have time for that right now because I get really excited talking about econ, and we still have time. To expand manufacturing, and I also remember too that back then manufacturing meant by hand. Uh, the government began to give benefits to French companies. So if you're a French company making shoes, he would lower your taxes so you could sell your shoes for a lower price and still make money, but people would buy French shoes or French wool or whatever. He would lower the taxes so that as a businessman or woman, yeah, you would pay less every year to the king. And since you're not paying so much of your profit back to the crown, you can lower your price a little, and then people are going to see that and buy more of your stuff. So this is trying to stimulate local economies over foreign economies. And then the next part, tariffs. Now, a tariff is a tax. It's another word for a tax, as you all know from your vocab. And the tariff is a tax on goods from other people to your country. It's an import tax. This also help bring in money and help the French economy. And that's tricky because if you make the tax too high, you can see retaliatory tariffs, like us in China. But this is what they did to try and stimulate the French economy so that the French made money. Colbert dies. Louis announced a policy that then slowed France's economic process. Oh, Louis, 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 Louis. He canceled the Edict of Nantes. The Edict of Nantes there's a group called the Huguenots, and if I'm going to spell it wrong, but oh goodness, and I'll spell it, the Huguenots. They are Protestants in France. The Edict of Nantes gave them religious freedom. They were free from persecution. France is still a Catholic country, but the Huguenots, they were like, just go do your Huguenot thing. He canceled that. So now it's not safe for the Huguenots to remain in France. So that's another thing he does that doesn't sit well with the people. Slows the French economy. People like making money. We're living through that right now. That real panic. And this is not a joke. Am I going to be able to feed my family is a big deal, whether it's 2020 or 1620. So slowing down an economy is not a good thing. Making certain groups in your country not feel safe is not a good thing for certain groups in your country, and it doesn't add to your legacy or to the stability of your country. Louis the 14th was known as the Sun King. Again, the sun rose and set. Like, that's just how important he thought he was. He spent a fortune to surround himself with luxury. Each meal was a feast. He controlled all the nobility. Outside his bed stood 100 of the most privileged people at his court. He ends up building a pretty big house called Versailles, and he houses thousands, I believe, of the nobility there. Think about it. If you know where the nobles are, they're easier to control. And conversely, if you're one of those nobles lucky enough to be in Louis's house, you have a chance to get his ear. You have a chance to offer some sort of suggestion to him. So it was almost symbiotic in that both benefited from this situation. In fact, one of the most coveted jobs I read a long time ago was the person responsible for holding his bedpan in the morning. That seems pretty gross, but if you're the first person he sees in the morning, you're the first person who has his ear, and he's going to see you every morning. They waited to help the king get dressed. Only 4 would be allowed to assist him. So every day out of those 100, he would choose 4. Maybe the same 4, maybe a different 4, but you wanted to be chosen. Outside the hallways, lesser nobles stood, hoping he'd get like a nod and what's up? Bonjour, ça va? Having nobles at the palace increased loyal authority too. Like I just said, it made them dependent on Louis. Oh, and he took away their homes, so he has their land, and he can resell their land, and the intendants, his own Tondon had more power. All right, this is a painting, obviously, of Versailles. This is the palace of the kings of France. This right here is one of the causes. This is sort of one of the foundational causes of the French Revolution. It doesn't happen under Louis the 14th, though. He gets to live the good life. This is just a thing about Versailles basically being a place of, nevertheless, since God accompanies his own power with visible splendor on earth and in the heavens as in the throne and palace. So basically, I'm the Sun King. I'm divinely chosen by God. God's palace is this, and it's beautiful and everything. I should have a palace equally marvelous. I give you Versailles. All right, great. Now, these are just some of the pictures of, this is his private chapel in this cathedral. In this palace. And these rooms, these pictures don't do it justice. I would love to go see this. And they're breathtaking. This is the nave. This is the Hall of Battles, one of the other many rooms in France, in Versailles. This is the King's Chamber. Well, one of them. I mean, it's just ornate and beautiful, and with sculpture and art from Renaissance painters, from antiquity, from just commissioned for him. This is Louis the 14th furniture, gold inlay, very elaborate, very detailed. All right, we're done for today. We'll finish with those. That's a lot of information. That was 2 of the big ones. We'll talk about England tomorrow and Russia tomorrow, and then a little bit with the lesser colonies, and then we'll we'll be finished with the absolute rulers. And then beginning Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to talk about how they went about getting this money. We're going to talk about exploration, Columbus and the slave trade and America and stuff that you've actually probably heard about. All right? That's all for now. That was a lot today. Thank you. And remember, feel free to pause if you have questions. Office hours are every Tuesday and Thursday, or whenever I sign them, depending on when you hear this. 1 to 2:30 for the remainder of this school year. I hope you're all safe. I wish you all well, and I'll see you next time. Peace.